Okay, thank you all for joining us today. Today is the community call for Tuesday, October 29th. The call focus today is fine-tuning your guest experience with equity and racial healing in mind. And Nancy is our wonderful facilitator for today. I'm Erin McCauley. I'm the RCC admin assist. I welcome all pronouns in reference to me and welcome you to share your pronouns if you would like to. I also welcome you to update your names to include your retreat center name if you would like to help other people know where you're coming from. And before we get started, I just want to share our core values and community agreements to let you know how we all like to participate in space together. And then we'll move into a little centering after that. Okay. So up on your screen, you should see the RCC core values. And these core values are the values that RCC sort of gathers around and is fundamental to our identity as an organization. The very first core value is the power of place and space. So at RCC, we recognize that retreat centers especially are places that are powerful spaces for change. They connect the land, they connect us to our inner selves and create spaces where we can catalyze change in ourselves and also in the world around us. And vice versa, the work that we're doing out in the world changes us also when we come into a retreat center space and spaces that are particularly cultivated for change. And in that change, the transformations that we're hoping to make in the world, though we're committed to universal flourishing. So that means not just things that are good for human life, but for other forms of existence, the land, more than human life, animal life, spiritual beings, and just the interworkings of the universe around us. So hoping to live into a collaboration that supports each other in being the best that we can be. Our community agreements on our calls, we're asking that you speak from your own experience. So if we're chatting about a subject and something arises for you that feels important to share, we'd really like you to share your stories. Your voice and your story are important. We're all knowers and learners in this space. So the idea is that, no one has the whole picture or none of us can do it all. So coming together, we're helping each other be more together than we each can be individually. So we're trying to grow together and learn together, and we all have gifts to share. Silence can be centering, and movement and sound can be centering as well. So we might use practices that involve just very simple, quiet, meditative reflection, just to give us a chance to sink into the same space together, to attune our focus to the topic for the day. We might also use movement and sound to bring us all into a centered space together. We do ask that you keep others' stories confidential, but share what you learn. So I mentioned before I started the recording, if there's a story that you want to share, but you would rather not have recorded, please let me know either verbally in the chat, some other way to let me know that you would like the recording to be paused, and I'll do that so that it won't be recorded. And yeah, when we're sharing our stories, we ask that you do take the learnings from people sharing their stories, but also allow people to have agency over telling their own stories. So if you can remove identifying information, especially from very, very tender, very personal stories, we ask that you do that. And this is an invitational space. Participate as you are able. We know retreat center folk are quite busy, so if you need to come late, leave early, listen in for a day, we ask that you just show up as you are, and we'll hold you in the space as best we can. So We also ask that you hold discomfort with grace and deep listening. So some of the topics that we'll talk about are a little bit tender, a little bit hard. They might bring up some feelings of resistance or make you feel a little bit upset. And that's part of what this space is made to hold. We want people to have the opportunity to really dig deep and create space for transformation with each other. And sometimes that's a little uncomfortable. So to really be tuned into showing up in the space with grace and deep listening. We're not here to fix each other, but we're trying to support each other as we move forward together through change. And last but not least, one of our favorite quotations is choice is the smallest unit of liberation. So if there are ways that we can offer you more choices, different ways to participate, please let us know. We would love to find better ways to support you all the time. So reach out at any point. Okay. Before we get going, I'd like to take a moment to let's take a deep breath to sort of sink into the space together. I'll be leading just a little short centering exercise because this is a time where we're noticing in the world around us and in ourselves here at RCC that there's a whole lot that we're all holding individually and collectively in the world around us and our personal lives. And some of it's very heavy and very stressful. And so let's all take a moment to just take a deep breath, sink into your seat, breathe in deep, and then breathe out slow. Let's take a moment to just be in this space together. Let go of any tensions you might be holding as we move into conversation. As you relax into your seat, take note of any places where you might be holding tension in your body. Breathe deeply into those spaces. And then when you breathe out, consciously let go. Allow your body to relax as you breathe out. Let's take a few breaths, following that same pattern. Breathing in deep. Breathing out slow. Breathing in deep. Breathing out slow. Breathing in deep and breathing out slow. As you come into this more relaxed, centered space, just allow yourself to be open to what it means to be here in this conversation today. Today, we're thinking about how we hold space for others with equity and racial healing in mind. And let's keep our minds in that space and let any other concerns that we might be holding, they'll be waiting for us when we leave the call. But let's hold them outside that space for right now, this space for right now. And bring awareness to gratefulness for this community, for the sports we have in each other who are living the same, a lot of the same experiences and walking a similar path, creating change and trying to support each other as we make transformational, supportive spaces for folks who really, really need it. And as you feel ready, take in another big, deep breath. Come back and I'll turn things over to Nanci. Nanci, would you like to introduce yourself and get us going?
Thank you. Thank you, Erin. Hi, friends. I feel like I have some old friends and some new friends in the room. My name's Nanci Lee. I am calling to you from Mi'kma'ki, which is Nova Scotia, Canada, up in the Northeast. Yeah, and it's a beautiful fall day here. We're just on the end of our leaves. And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about, as Erin said, our guest experience at Tatamagouche Centre and how we really tried to center equity and racial healing. I thought we could start with, we're a small group. I thought we could start with some brief introductions with all of us, see who we have in the room. And maybe you could tell us who you are, the retreat center that you're working with, representing, and what is the question or what are you sitting with around equity or racial healing? Is there a question or something that comes to mind for you? So yeah, Kriti, did I
Yes,
pronounce
I
your
can
name well?
start.
Please.
My name is Kriti Kanko. I am sitting in Rapaho and Ute lands, otherwise known as Colorado, United States. I'm representing Rocky Mountain Eco-Dharma Retreat Center. Um, our center was established by three white dudes and me. I'm one of the co-founders, and it continues to be a very wide space, and I don't think our teachers are prepared to hold BIPOC needs. We keep having these retreats, even those led by BIPOC teachers, black teachers even, where community agreements are not set and white participants are in majority, and it ends up inevitably causing hurt for BIPOC, queer, trans participants, if there are any. And so we are in this dilemma of how do you take care of, how do you invite people from marginalized communities safely into these white led or majority white spaces. So I'm really interested to hear what experiences you can share.
Thank you, Kriti, and for really encapsulating what I think a lot of retreat centers are facing and sitting in. Thank you. Ananya, I see you're unmiked, ready to go.
I am. So I'm from the Crotona Institute of Theosophy. We are in Ojai, California. We are celebrating 100 years this year. And in general, the Theosophical Society has always been, that's been part of our mission, is to create an environment that is welcoming to all religions, all races, people from different walks of life. And being out here in Ojai, which is predominantly a white community, we're a bit of an anomaly because our community is basically international. We have people representing 10 to 11 different countries. We have people who speak different languages, have different, it's not so much, many of the people that are here are older, but open-minded enough, because we've had people come who've been wanting to participate in our programs from the queer community. Nobody has blinked an eye. They've been welcoming, they've been loving. So part of my reason for joining RCC and coming to the meetings is because we're looking for support. We've found that our attendance levels are down. And I was thinking that it would be very good for one of us, and that was me, to find a group to just listen and share and have some support. So, I'm just interested to hear what everyone else is going through, what their experiences are. And I love the fact that you're doing counsel, because that's basically the format you're following is counsel, and it's just wonderful. So I feel like I'm right where I need to be. So thank you.
Thank you, Adanya. Yeah, we'll have some good time to break into groups and hear a lot more about the different practices from folks on the call today. So yes, thank you.
I can jump in. My name's Nicola. I'm on Lenape land in what's now known as Eastern Pennsylvania at RHI Retreat Center. And I was glad to see this call happening. We've been part of the Racial Healing Initiative for the past couple of years and have done a lot of work with staff. And this is still a historically white organization, and it's like baked into the walls. Just yesterday, I was giving a tour to two Black women, a board member and her partner, and one of the guests from a predominantly white group that was here said, "Oh, there's the cleaning crew." You know, it's just, and obviously we can't control what guests say, but just, so I think it's not a well-formulated question, but I guess the question is like help. And I'm eager to hear others' experiences. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicola. Oh, also want to lift up, I know that you're doing from my experience with the Racial Healing Initiative, I know you've also done a lot of strong work and naming and responsibility and practices. So thank you. Yeah, let's hear from others. What questions are front of mind for you, or what are you sitting in?
Hey, everybody. My name is Mike Scott, and I'm my first time here. So I work with Jamie Deering at the Franciscan Sisters of Little Falls, Minnesota, and I'm the director of integral ecology. And we're not quite a retreat center in a way. Maybe Jamie's described that, but we're maybe moving that direction and also developing the sisters as part of their legacy, are doing habitat restoration on their land and also want to create an environmental learning center. And I suppose one of my questions is simply, we haven't started the actual, how should the buildings look? What should the land and the buildings include so that all people would see themselves here at some level anyway? Just what are the signs even? So when someone approaches a building or walks into the whatever we develop, that they'd say, oh yeah, I feel like I could maybe check this out even and see myself here. So that's probably where we're at. Yeah, that's enough for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike, and welcome. Welcome to your first call.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
And maybe I could just tag on Mike. I feel like I just want to say yes and to so many of the things that have been said. I'm Leslie. I'm with Prairie Woods Franciscan Spirituality Center in Iowa. So the comments about being a primarily white space, yep, that's us. Primarily white, female, and older. And so we've been part of the Racial Healing Initiative this last year, and it's been a little rocky internally. you know, people not necessarily understanding why we need to do some of this work. And, you know, but we have been building bridges of relationships. And so but there's more to do. And I'm not the only voice, but I'm the primary voice asking us to move in this direction. So you are my support group, and you are the ones who are going to write me the permission slip. And how does that sound? And maybe help me make the to-do list. So.
Thanks, Leslie. All the support and permission you need. We're here. Hi, Sonia. Welcome.
I guess I can go. I can connect with Mike where I don't know if I'd say I'm really a retreat center, representing a retreat center, and also with Andy who said I can't she, he, they, I can't see your pronouns. I'm new and was kind of hoping just to listen in. I historically have worked for an interfaith pastoral counseling agency. And I usually did the workshops and retreats because I have a health background and provided that service through an interfaith community. They unfortunately couldn't make it through COVID, and we just closed in July. So thanks. So I'm hoping to carry on the work, and I've always partnered with, someone from this religion or that religion, which was a helpful insight to the members who were coming for different sessions. And I won't have that anymore, although I hope to continue those partnerships. But I thought it would be interesting to listen in and see if it was something that had overlap with the type of work that I'm hoping to continue.
Thank you, Margaret. And yeah, sorry for that. That's a tender transition, but so glad to hear you're continuing with the work. Spirit.
I can go. I'm Erin Franson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm with Holy Wisdom Monastery in Madison, Wisconsin. Fairly new to the community, started in January of 2024. I came from school leadership, so this has been it's not an unfamiliar conversation, and also and like that had a school role acutely aware of how tender, painful, and long, and how many missteps and can happen during that transition of an organization, and that it's never done. And then, coming from schools that centered whiteness, and then being, now at this retreat center that is also a very white centered space, very well intended, and would definitely speak that racial healing would be part of our intentions. But I also, like I hear from many of you, sit on that fine line of trying to push the community forward and also not cause more undue harm.
Thank you, Erin, again, for naming, what many of us are sitting in, that the centering of whiteness and the difficulty of moving some of these practices forward. Thank you. Who do we have left? And always an invitation, no requirement to speak if you don't feel called to today, or if you're working alongside and just lurking, listening in, all fine.
I can go. My name is Prema, and I'm here representing True Nature Travels. We started off as a retreat center in Costa Rica, And for the last 12 years, we are a yoga travel company, big travel company based out of Asheville, North Carolina, traditional territory of the Cherokee. So this is my first call with the collaboration, and I'm here to listen and to learn. And our teacher base is primarily white, older women. And we would like to change that. We would like to broaden that. So thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. And a new animal in the mix. We have always welcome. And your educational experience too, Erin. It's good to have these, different strains of wisdom. Thank you.
Hey, I'm sorry I wasn't able to join you earlier. We have daily staff meetings at 1 o'clock now, and it's just a lot to juggle. And I'm Sonia, and I'm the executive director at Southern Dharma. And we had a hurricane, and it changed our lives forever, and they'll never go back to the way they were before. So we are, we found on the topic that we're talking about now, we've just found that the investments and effort and pure intention that we've been putting in for years around diversifying the community at Southern Dharma it's just really, there's just been a lot of bearing fruit in the context of this time of great need. And, I was just sitting outside the space that we're occupying, where we're doing most of our hurricane recovery work from now. And we were outside having a meeting with 6 of us who are kind of part of the core team. And 3 of those people are people of color. And it's just like, it's not just to be able to kind of, say like, okay, well, that takes care of that. 50% of the staff is people of color, but it's just like, it's not that. It's that what the perspectives that communities to than other ones.
Sonia, you're cutting
we're reaching. Oh yeah.
Sorry, because we really want to hear what you're saying.
Oh, it's okay. I'll turn my camera off and then maybe it'll be better. How's that so far? Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, just to saying that like the diversity that we have on the staff and in our community generally, and that was very intentionally built, I think, over a number of years here of very focused work. It's borne fruit in so many different ways, and that we have like ideas and perspectives and ways of doing things that are coming forward now as part of this process of disaster recovery work that are just fundamentally different than I think they would have been otherwise. So it's extremely, it's every day, every moment is completely heartbreaking. And at the same time, it's like, I feel so uplifted by the fruits of the practice, and also all the work that's gone into building a resilient community that's inclusive of many different people from many different backgrounds. So that's what I would share. And in terms of like what's alive for me now, in terms of the work that we're doing, I would say it's about continuing to meet the needs and support of the elders in our community, who are our rock, and who constitute really the heart core of the whole thing, and whose needs, we need to meet as a spiritual institution, while really leaning hard into really stimulating a lot more youthful connections. We have, a good base of young people who are engaged with Southern Dharma, and I feel like the next step is going to be really kind of really energizing our work around people in their 20s and in their 30s. I think that'll be probably a really important focus for Southern Dharma in the years ahead, along with the other things that we typically focus on, being, meeting the needs of the queer community and also people of color. So thanks for being there. And it's just nice to be in community with you right now.
Yeah. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you so much. Just want to lift up how the amazing resilience and recovery work that Southern Dharma has been engaged in, just like a testament to your years of community organizing, as you said, in really diverse communities. So we're with you, and yeah, we really have felt this last time. Thank you. Who have we not heard from who would like to speak?
Hi,
Jess.
Jess Wicker, she, her. I'm representing Camp Friedenswald for the Peaceful Woods, sitting in Potawatomi land, Band of Pokagon in southwestern Michigan. Camp Friedenswald is sort of a year-round mixed bag of outdoor education groups that we get schools to come in, our own programming, where that's summer camps for families, youth. We also do retreats like women's retreats, and this weekend coming up, we have a restoration retreat, mixing sustainability with spirituality. And then we also have guest groups. So there's sort of three components. I'm the guest group director at Camp Friedenswald, and I'm pretty much the first line with all calls and inquiries that come in for booking guest groups. That could be church groups, that could be families, that could be college halls, that could be, and it is Camp Friedenswald is rooted in Mennonite and Baptist tradition. So there's a lot of Swiss, German, Russian whiteness around here, but there is a very concerted effort by the camp and churches that support us to make sure that our diversity, equity, inclusion work is happening and present. We've actually lost some guest groups that won't come back to us because of our statement on our website, which we're okay with. Something I am sitting with guest services, I just want to make sure I'm learning and being open as much as I can, so that my work in my anywhere from the very initial conversation with a group up to how it's planned and what expectations are, and follow through. All those steps aren't just dependent on someone who's being thoughtful, but it's actually baked into the system on what our standard operating protocol is. And the nice thing is we have anywhere from a Mennonite church to a Catholic church. We have Muslim groups that have started coming to camp to do the retreats, which we're super excited about. We have a lot of healing also in the queer community between like Mennonite and Brethrens, that in the past, Camp Friedenswald was not as welcoming. And there's been a healing work that's going on with that. I'm not personally involved directly with that effort, but that is something we have been working on actively. But yeah, so I'm sitting and making sure I'm learning as much as possible, but also setting up a standard where, it's not just one person, it's baked into how we treat our guests and hospitality.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to pick up on your, Deborah, I'll let you go, but I'm going to pick up on your baked in that I think someone else mentioned, baked into the walls, because it's so necessary that it's throughout the culture. Deborah, sorry, go on. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm in the neighborhood of Southwest Michigan also, and I work at Gilchrist Retreat Center. I'm not there right now, but yeah, so I'm also like the sort of front office administration scheduling person, so I do a lot of interacting with guests. And one thing our team has been sort of pondering is how someone else mentioned how a guest could see themselves at our center, in our buildings, feeling comfortable and feeling like they belong there. Because our center was built by white people, it's located in a rural area, which can be a hard sell. Um, and we also have this fund called the Retreat Equity Fund that we've sort of rolled out over the past year, available for people who identify with marginalized communities or come from marginalized communities. And so we've been just sort of workshopping it and tweaking and asking for feedback and just trying to get that to a good spot.
Thank you, Deborah. Liz? Sorry, I thought you were going to go, Liz.
I think Liz mentioned that she's just listening in today.
Working. Okay, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Deborah. I feel like you're raising similar issues that we're all facing a lot of the same in trying to really bake it into our culture. Think of all the ways that people can feel really at home. Is there anyone left to introduce who they are, the retreat center, what you're sitting in terms of equity? Okay. Then I will share with you a little bit of my experience at Tatamagouche Centre. I think I mentioned we're in Mi'kma'ki. That's unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq territory. And the center, over a long period of decades, has edged toward rematriation of the land and governance. So we're now in a process of what some call land back. We're not calling it land back because the land was never ceded in the first place. And so what I want to speak to is some of the threads, some of the pieces that led to the diversifying of the center. Tatamagouche Centre was founded by United Church of Canada, also very white, kind of led for years. I was the first BIPOC ED at the center in 2020. And so we're still, I want to reiterate what I hear was said about this is the long game of practices. And as Nicholas shared, it also, the fact that we're in it, we have diversity, we have representation at leadership levels, also doesn't stop transgressions or harm from happening. And so let me first situate you, like I want to just introduce myself a bit more. So I'm Nanci Lee. I'm a facilitator. I was ED at Tatamagouche Centre. I'm looking into a new role there, in a shared leadership role. I'm also a poet, and my bloodlines are Syrian Chinese. I also come from a working class family and was the first to go to university. So I very much come at these issues very much come up at these issues from a class kind of gendered perspective. I have, for example, when I used to be a participant at the center as an artist, a poet, a community member, I remember, I could apply for a bursary. And I remember thinking, well, I don't have a lot of income. But am I the poorest? Like, should I be taking this opportunity from someone else? So one of the things I did when I became ED is I got rid of that application process that had me tell people about my story. And we simply provided a tiered system on an honor basis, two aggressive bursary prices, one true cost and one generous cost. So I'm gonna back up a little bit in the history. What led to rematriation was years back, establishing real relations with the Indigenous communities in the area, and solidarity work for the rights that they were fighting for, moderate livelihood rights, fishing rights. There was a real bearing witness for some of that work, which led to peace and friendship gatherings where people were just coming together, being in ceremony, breaking bread, getting to know one another. It was an Indigenous elder, his name's Gisa Tanamuk, a Wampanoag elder, who said, people don't know us. They don't know us. We need a program. We need gathering space where we can actually learn to be neighbors, where we can learn to be friends. So the first thing I want to say is, a Zen Roshi, Norma Wong, I'm going to kind of quote her, and she said, this work is belly button to belly button. And if I could I'm just going to read a short quote from her around this. I think this is really, really central. So she said, we can say that we are in service. Oh, let me find this, sorry. We can say that we're in service or some such. But even that needs to be liberated. Not charity, not even a whiff of it. Not until we're belly button to belly button, and we do not know who is served, and so we are all served. And I thought that, and in her language, she's a Hawaiian elder, it's pico a pico, which is even more beautiful, but belly button to belly button. And that's the first point I want to make, belly button to belly button. So I think for myself, I don't even use the words diversity or inclusion anymore. In BIPOC circles, inclusion is something where the center is bringing me in. It's kind of the lowest hanging fruit, right? And I often don't have a meaningful say. Equity was, okay, they give me the executive director role, but actually until the culture's changed, until the board's willing to do its work, until we actually have, as you said, it's baked into the culture and we're all committed to that. And I will say Tatamagouche is still in that, for a widespread major cultural shift, even though there's vibrant Black community, vibrant queer community, early lesbian dances, we're in rematriation, still to have it baked in so that any member of the staff or community can represent it, and we're not worried about transgressions or microaggressions. We're still in those practices. And so for me, that's the end is even beyond equity. It's kind of when, I think you said it, Mike, when we all feel at home, when that trans participant has a razor in the bathroom because they're still in their transition, and that's going to help them to feel more themselves, more whole. When the bathrooms are gender neutral and people don't have to be afraid of claiming who they are. I'll tell you a controversial thing that I did. There was a 10-foot cross in our sanctuary space because we too were built in the 50s by the United Church of Canada, cinder block buildings. But when I heard an Indigenous elder say, I can't go into that room, it feels like a residential school to me. That's harmful. That's a space that does not. We're proud to be United Church because United Church has also done a lot of its own reconciliation work, but there is no need to have a symbol that overpowers other backgrounds, other symbols. So we collectively decided to do that, and that there would be no symbols, that each group would be able to bring in their symbols, and we would talk about all of who we are. Those are the things that I think helped gain more trust in some of these communities that are still, someone mentioned some groups have gone. That happened at the center too. I think, something that happened at the center is there's been harm in the past. There's been racist leadership in the past. And there have been people who will not come back and may never come back. And frankly, I don't blame them, because if I were in their, we had one of our Muslim leading facilitators, Muhammad, he said that he had one of the staff members in leadership tell him, why do you have to have halal food? Do you know how expensive that is? We're a rural center. That has to be called racist. Like to not, maybe you can't accommodate all of the cultural and dietary needs, but to not offer why, or to not sit down with a conversation. So now, we proudly say, this is halal chicken tonight. And we've had people say to us, well, this doesn't seem fair to me. I'm Christian. Why not this? And we say, because you can't eat halal chicken and they can't eat your food. And so how do we genuinely make it a place where everyone feels at home? And that does mean decentering. That means inviting people to, I always say no one is being asked to leave the circle, even in rematriation. The clan mothers are not asking anyone to leave the center. They're simply asking to be stewards of it. So it's not asking anyone to leave the center, but it is asking for more bodies to feel welcome in the circle. It's a very different emphasis. So the second thing I would say, so the first thing is belly button to belly button. How does everyone feel at home? And that's everything from the food to the welcome, to the programming, to who people see facilitating, to who's in the leadership, to who's on the board. And as I said, these are practices. This is long, and the culture. The second thing I would say is implicate yourself. I implicate myself. So it's not out there. I've said this before at Tata, this is deep spiritual ninja territory. How do we implicate ourselves in it? It's not like there's someone out there who doesn't get it. We're all deep in practices around respecting pronouns, around having the cultural humility to understand that we don't understand everything, and trying to get those people to the table. And so how do we genuinely take responsibility for our transgressions? And I can promise you, transgressions and microaggressions are happening all the time, whether we know it or not, whether we admit it or not. So each organization and circle is going to have their way of doing it, but a way of normalizing. Normalizing that. Let me finish my thought. I'm getting all passionate. I lost 2 board members simply because I said to the board member, we need you to take some responsibility here. Microaggressions are happening all the time. This does not make you a bad person. I have committed microaggressions. But we will support you in working with this. And he resigned from the board and took another board member with him. And I think if you're really committed to this path, this journey, I think that's going to be true. I think someone mentioned, that you lost people. I think some people, and we're seeing this painful divisiveness. We're seeing upcoming to the election. I mean, we're watching in Canada, like with, tender hearts as well. It's, again, my spiritual stance is I'm always going to believe in your highest humanity. And we might not be journeying together in this particular work right now. And I mean, that's for you. But I do believe that this implicate yourself, it is a time, at Tatamagouche Centre, we use something called Dialogue for Peaceful Change. And it's a process of just listening, being real, taking responsibility, and turning conflict into something generative, even if it has to be moderated. And I think you need your own process, but I would say it's a time for us to be real. to be real, if I could say what is different for me in BIPOC circles, I volunteer with a community land trust, and even this, Aaron and I just came back from a racial healing initiative retreat at SoulFire Farm. Oh my gosh. Just deeply embodied, magical place, grounded in ceremony. Every single person is oozing their values and their purpose, which is land and food sovereignty, with all that they are. You feel it. It's there. They don't even have building, like they're building their buildings. They've been in the works 20 years, but yeah, they're the real, the embodied. So that would be my second. My second is normalize real, embodied, and normalize microaggressions. Have a way of talking about it. Have a way of bringing it into your culture, because otherwise it can really hit you sideways. And I can speak from experience there. And the last thing I'll say, I don't want to talk, I want us to have a good opportunity to talk and share ourselves. But the last thing I would say, one of our elders, Grand Chief Ron Tremblay, he's a Woolastaki hereditary chief. And what he said, you can imagine we're having a lot of beautiful ceremony, indigenous ceremonies, smudging, circles, 4-day gatherings. And many people become so enamored that, there can even be appropriation where they want to smudge or they want to, and we have to really push back on that. And so his invitation was, these are my spiritual bundles. These are my ancestral bundles. Go and pick up your own. And so we had a gathering last fall, 7 generations backward and forward in that indigenous beautiful worldview that honors not just listening to the land, but listening to our ancestors and listening to our children and our future generations. But we also had an opportunity for everyone to walk the land and reckon with your own ancestral violence of contact, but also beauty, because all of our ancestors have the ceremony, the rituals, we all have these powerful practices. And so just picking up and leaning into that, it's not only about our treaty and our sacred responsibility in terms of equity, racial healing, and it's also how we lean into, how we become microcosms of the world we want. And I've seen it in all of these retreat centers, that these corners of energy, the divine, that we know it, we feel it. How do we grow that? And I believe that's deeply leaning into our ancestral practices. And some of these practices, again, of being together in ceremony, in truth telling, naming is another very powerful element. One of our elders said, we're still in the truth part of truth and reconciliation. So just naming, what we see in front of us. We have a land walk at Tatamagouche, and we did one at SoulFire as well. And part of that land walk is the beauty of the land and the different communities, but part of it is telling the truth of the violence of contact and our past, and not only with Indigenous folks, also with Acadian folks who were dispossessed of their land. I think I will leave it there. I'm going to just leave us with another quote from Norma Wong. And she says, again, this is in her language, Kokoro, the time of Kokoro is upon us. And this is kind of a spiritual awakening. It was foretold more than 30 years ago, the age in which spirit will rise with urgency and hope as the preeminent force and engine of all that is. The time is upon us. And we do not yet know whether it is about a rise in the collective spirit that is here, or whether the collective spirit will go underground, driven by both darkness and the urgency of fierce hope, to commit to the rigor of preparing for an awakening of humanity. It is impossible to know, except that the time is upon us. Surely it is. And I'll leave you with those words. Maybe we can open it up for a few thoughts, what comes up for you before we break into groups, and dig a little bit more into our practices, into sharing our practices and thoughts. Thank you. Yeah, so let's open it up. I know that many of you are deep in these practices. This is Nicola.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nanci. I just really appreciated hearing more about the process that you all have been in. I have a thought and then a question. The thing that I felt really convicted by, one of the things that I felt really convicted by as you were speaking is the willingness to lose a board member. Yeah, I'm just thinking about that. We have, we're sustained by donations. We have some very powerful people who give, and we have lost some donors because of the stake we've taken on Palestine. But yeah, it's making me think about just the courage it takes to be willing to risk that conflict, you know, particularly with board members who've been involved for a long time and are connected to a lot of the people who support this place. So thank you for that. My question was really about I also have seen reference to the land walk, and I'm very curious about that practice and wondered if you could say just another couple sentences about what happens on those walks.
Oh, sure. Well, the land walk started in COVID when we had a videography program canceled. So we used the proceeds for that to interview a number of people in the community. A social justice youth camp that we had, Indigenous elders talking about land back. And what we did was we asked, so there's quite a variety, the Black elder that I was talking about, Muhammad. And what we did is we asked each one, what is a special place on the land for you? It could be a building, a room, or it could be. And based on that, we had enough variety that we were able to thread it together into an audio walk. It's about little under an hour. And we encourage groups and programs to use it, either a part of it or all of it, because you can just kind of listen with your phone and walk the land. And the other thing that it does is it puts them directly in relationship with the land itself. Because we basically say, start at first light, look toward the water, walk to this building. We tell a little bit about the history, good, bad, and ugly. And you hear from members of the community. So I used to kind of play that role, or some of our hospitality staff would. And then we realized it's so much more powerful to have a variety of voices tell that story. So yeah, thanks for asking. I'm happy to share that too. It's on SoundCloud. And it's free. You can have a listen if it helps.
Posted a link in the chat, Nanci.
Oh, thanks, Darren. Any other thoughts or questions or sharing?
Nanci, thank you so much. So many thoughts here. I can you well two things. One is practical level. if some retreat center was just starting their journey, we are not just starting, but let's say the center is only 6 years old now, and it's coming out of its white founderitis, and I'm about to leave the board myself, so it will be new people. Early stages, what kind of trainings does the staff need? And if there are any recommendations on these are the right trainers. And I know there are many names around, but some people are not used to cultures of retreat centers or needs of retreat centers. So that's practical thing. And so there are a couple of people here from guest services. What is the minimal we need to start with? Basics. So if there is any such recommendation, that would be helpful. The second, I am more curious about the rematriation aspect. Where is your center right now? Can Indigenous elders communities come and go anytime they want? What is the agreement where space is being shared? Like, how do you prioritize who comes when?
Wow, two very big questions. The first, in terms of the training, it's I'm hesitant to say I know what training serves everyone, but I would say what has been important for Tatamagouche Centre was some basic. We did basics around power and gender intersectional dynamics, like being able to name them, being able to understand them. When we passed an anti-racism, anti-oppression mandate, we did some training around that. What does anti-racism mean? And some of that was, what does it mean to name? What does it mean to take responsibility? I spoke to Dialogue for Peaceful Change. That's a generative conflict tool that we use at Tatamagouche Centre. But I think, there are lots of nonviolent communication, lots of different models of how to listen, paraphrase, take responsibility, and move toward generative solutions that are not harmful. I think understanding whiteness, using things like white supremacy principles as a training basis has been very helpful. And understanding what microaggression, my board member had never heard of microaggressions. And so one of the challenge was that I was doing a lot of personal educating, which thankfully my board identified as harmful. And it was, it should not have been on me on top of everything else that was on me. And so, yeah, there are so many layers to be honest, Kriti, where I came to in terms of the training, we were so under-resourced to be able to do the formal workshops and our board members and staff are not, they're in different provinces. So even the cost of bringing everyone together. So while we had that, I realized we need a process for every time a transgression happens. It's a learning moment for all of us. We don't name names, we don't shame, but we use each one and we talk about it at the staff level and the board level. So we called that process kind of like a loving accountability. And little things like Aunt Jemima syrup on the on the table, and we have an African Nova Scotian women's retreat. Like the tiniest thing, or a staff member innocently asking, "Where are you from?" to a racialized person, and that leading to a lot of anger and frustration. So every time there was like a raise of temperature, a transgression, a migration, I think it's also a way alongside of formal trainings, because some people also don't come to the formal trainings. That's what I found a little hard and frustrating. Yeah. And to answer your second,
Absolutely true. People who need the most training will find a reason to skip these
that's right.
trainings. So
And
I
yeah,
really love what you're saying.
And to the second point, I mean, we have a peace and friendship program that we've had for decades. So there's Indigenous programming, these gatherings, these multi-day gatherings, as well as kind of raising awareness about writing relations. And so that has always been part of our programming. But in terms of making space, I mean, it helped that I was ED. So, what we would do is we would basically say, this amount is reserved for hosted gatherings and this amount is reserved for programs, and we're ensuring that there's a certain number of programs that are dedicated to BIPOC, queer. Yeah, and we did that by season. We just made sure every season that's what happened. And there's ways of providing incentives for board members. I don't know, depends on your bylaws, but we looked at, can we pay BIPOC folks to be on our board, just a small stipend, because it's harder to attract, bandwidths, capacities, all of that. So, the same can be true for facilitators. So I'm mindful of the time. Do we want to continue large group discussion, or do we want to break into smaller groups and have some kind of reflection and sharing about some of the practices you're in or some of the questions you have? How are folks? That's what we were going to do next. Mike, did you have?
Well, I just had a general comment. If there's after this conversation, if there's a possibility of putting together a summary of ideas, or like, here's a really good organization to go to for training or resources, or it'd just be helpful to make, I mean, my colleagues might have that, but I don't know. I'm new here. So that kind of resource might be helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Erin, does that feel?
Yeah, I can invite folks to email me their resources if you have something, links or materials that you would like to share out. I'll pop my email in the chat. Yeah, feel free to send things my way and I can gather everything together. Yep.
That'd be helpful.
And one thing I would say is Racial Healing Initiative, which is a group of trainers who have worked with some of your retreat centers, does some of this work with retreat centers and could do focused. Well, I shouldn't say that. We can check with them if kind of something outside of their, they do kind of a longer racial healing program with retreat centers, but I don't know if more individual workshops are possible by them, but we can check. But there's certainly, I'm sure many of us could recommend trainings or trainers. So we can compile that. Who have you used? Maybe that's a good question to go out to the wider community. Who have you used for racial healing, equity work?
I would just jump in from a couple of perspectives. One is, what's interesting to me is the Franciscan sisters, the Perpetual Adoration, have been doing a fairly in-depth examination. And what's been really interesting for me, since we're a ministry of, and we're not in the same location as our parent, I'll call it parent organization or sponsoring organization, we haven't seen the same, there's been a divide, if you will. So there's been a real richness of offerings that has gotten deeper and deeper over the last several years, particularly around Indian boarding school history, the doctrine of discovery, excuse me, was something they just recently were diving deep into. And I've really appreciated that. But I think sometimes we behave and think of ourselves as separate from And so while I have participated in as much as I could, the rest of my team has not. And I have really wrestled with how I require that, because at the same time, I'm also wrestling with organizational structure, and how do we move more towards distributed leadership and a sociocracy versus hierarchical, and telling everyone you must do this,
Yeah.
on one hand feels very hierarchical, and on the other hand feels very essential.
Yes.
So some of my journey of learning began back in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I was introduced to white privilege. And so I had a board member show up. We were asked to bring an item of significance to us. I had a board member show up with a bale of cotton, which caused, yes, Nicola, that is true. And I think he very sincerely intended it as a storytelling tool about how he was recognizing his history.
Yes.
But it wasn't experienced that way. And we were encouraged to really bring together particularly members of our Black community to be part of the experience. And what I learned too late, like as I'm watching it unfold, is that I had relationships with everyone in the room. The rest of my team did not. So when you say this is a long haul, I really should have probably taken about 2 years. And this retreat center, when I was board chair, I began asking my predecessor and associate director, how can we be more outward facing? How can we engage with community? How can we build relationships? And the answer was, we're just too busy. We have so much stuff to do. And so my way of describing myself is I'm an inside out person. So anyways, the point of that is, I learned the hard way. It is so much longer than I would hope. And I think we can get pinched by our notions that we're religious or we're spiritual in institutions, and therefore, because I've heard my team say it, we're good people. And the scales have not fallen from our eyes in terms of what space looks like, what welcome looks like. I think there's a lot of good stuff out there online, frankly, if you have someone who's a decent facilitator who can do things in groups so people watch the same information and then digest that information and reflect back how they're experiencing it. But then, and one last thing. So I don't know about the rest of you, but I end up being HR, facilities management, finance, whatever. And my background is not HR. So, how do we even create a collective for each other of just counsel, right? Because it is good to have a place where you can say, holy crap, man, now what?
Absolutely, Leslie. Yeah. I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head. You need a council, you need a committee, you need a group to hold it. It can't be 1 or 2 people pushing out with this kind of massive. And I think you hit on another thing that's really key that I didn't mention, but I think is really important, and that is pace. It does require slowing down to be in step with everyone. We don't want to hear that. We have to reduce the number of programs to make time for this, or this is going to affect our social business model, but we do need to slow down to be in step. We just do. To have the time to have the conversations, to sit down, to go through conflict, to listen. I think that's really, really key, what you raised. And I'm not saying it's easy. We have not figured out how to do that, and keep the ship righted all the time, but Ananya.
Well, I was going to say that I so appreciate what you said, Leslie. Truly, I was like shaking my head, and my dear cat, he lost his brother yesterday, so he's meowing a lot. And I was like, be quiet. I need to listen to what she has to say. But the whole thing about the conversations, that's one of the problems we have that I could put my finger on here, is that we need to have some of these deeper conversations, but the problem is that there's so much work to do, and there's so few of us that are doing the work. And so it really is what you said, Nanci, it's slowing it down. But how do you slow it down so that people can be present, so that you can have those conversations and be completely in that moment? Because we've been trying to do that, and we do some of it through our workshops and the programs we do here. But it's 2 hours and then it's over. And then everyone goes back to work. We need something that's much more consistent. So thank you. I'm glad to know there's others that are going through that as well. You feel like, okay, we're not alone.
Something I would say just really quickly to your, the experience we had at SoulFire, and I would say the best of Tata, is a lot of ceremony. One of the elders said, we're kinder to one another in ceremony. And I can attest, when we had BIPOC gatherings that were focused on some of these issues, but people were in their heads, it often ended in conflict. When we were in ceremony dealing with really painful reckoning, it was very different, very, very different. So, and SoulFire held us so beautifully. I mean, everything was touched with ceremony. And I mean, many of us, we are spiritual and justice, but we are spiritual retreat centers. And so I would offer that's a very powerful container. And I think it's actually ironically underutilized. I would say for us, it was underutilized until we started in the rematriation and we realized we need to use ceremony a lot more, a lot more.
Nanci, maybe you can say, what do you mean by word ceremony? Are you sick? What makes something ceremonial? This discussion, is this ceremonial, what we are doing or not? I also wanted to say, even in this space, as a brown woman, I feel like maybe in future, if it gets bigger, I understand all of these concerns Leslie and Ananya talked about, and my brown body feels like we can slow it down. It's necessary for my survival. So please do it. So, if there is time, I want to ask for all centers who are in United States to pay attention to what happens after election. It can be a big time for building solidarity, because our BIPOC friends are truly scared in some places, really. If there are 5 minutes, I want to offer some resource on that.
Yes.
We are all scared.
Thank you. Please do. We do have a few minutes. Kriti, if you'd like to offer some resources.
I'm gonna pull up 2 links, or if there is a way, Nanci, I think the simplest would be that if I can email one of you and you forward it to others.
Absolutely.
It's a set of slides that came from an organization called Faith in Life. interfaith group, and they are making congregations go through a set of steps, questions, so to make sure how they're going to offer support to most marginalized groups, queer, trans, immigrants, which might not have the right paperwork or whatever. And I think no solutions there, but very good questions to take up as a community. So I'll
Wonderful.
send that email.
Thank you.
Yeah, I posted my email in the chat for you.
We're coming up to time. Your question, Kriti, on ceremony. I think ceremony, I'll speak for myself, and I'd love to hear from others. For me, the 4-day gatherings that are part of the Peace and Friendship program, they are deeply held in ceremony, Indigenous ceremony. So they're held by elders. There's a lot of sitting in circle, smudging, drumming, singing. There's no agenda. If you need to go to your room and rest, if you want to sit under a tree with elders, if you want to go down and do crafts in the kitchen and have a snack, there's a lot of free-flowing movement, but there's an invitation to sit in sacred space. And I think ceremony may be different for different retreat centers. It might be, sitting at Southern Dharma. It might be smudging. But even at SoulFire, I can say they led us in a water ceremony that had us connecting with our ancestors and our deep, heartfelt connection. We did a walk where we were given kernels of corn and asked to place corn on the land where we felt energy. So personally, it's whenever I feel my heart and my spirit held, is ceremony. And it can happen online. But it's certainly very powerful in place on the land. I think that's one of the things that our centers really, so powerfully offer. Anyone else want to answer that question about ceremony before we to close off?
I think what you said, just my own experience, is no agenda is really important, as opposed to saying how many people have done DEI trainings, which have an agenda, to enter an agenda-less space where heart and spirit are held. That sounds beautiful. And then it can allow people to slow down and enter their own grief and rage. Part of it is just managing the guilt of being so fast all the time. So thank you.
Do we have any ministers, spiritual leaders here? I thought we could actually have a moment. It just hold one another in circle as we head into the election, as we think of those like Sonia and her center kind of in recovery. Just so I was going to see if there's any ministers like to offer a prayer or a meditation.
I can do that. Will that be okay? Okay. Maybe I'll invite us to put our feet on the ground if that is physically possible for you. And let's just take a minute, just like we started, to relax your body and let your weight fall fully on the chair. Relax your shoulders. Maybe parts of the conversation, even here, were edgy, uncomfortable. But let's release it to Mama Earth. Let your weight go, let your tongue be soft, let your eyes be soft. And if you like, you can imagine that your spinal cord is growing, going deep into the earth, maybe reaching core of the earth. We are deeply held even when we feel pain, stress. If you like, you can also imagine that roots of your own body, your spine, are growing towards some people in this space, like wanting to make subconscious connection so we can mutually support each other. It's okay if you don't want to grow towards everyone. Take your time. And may this web, however complete or incomplete that is, of our psyches wanting to connect to each other, may this web support us as we enter a week that could bring turbulence, chaos, or even violence, physical violence. May we be rooted, may we be supported by invisible realms, our gods, our deities, be one god or many gods. May what is most supportive in the short and long term to bring up nurturance for Mother Earth, nurturance for all beings, may that happen. And if that doesn't happen, may we collectively stand up in a rooted way to support all life and all those who don't have a seat at the table. May that be so.
Thank you, Kriti. Thank you all. Erin has a quick announcement before we.
Yeah, just to let folks know that the next community call will be on November 12th. It will be a follow-up racial healing workshop, hopefully to help hold folks in the wake of the election. So if you can join us for that call, we would love to have you there. Yep. Thanks all for being here with us in conversation today.
Be well.